Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 5Bears1WickedProblem podcast. This is a special podcast in which 5 young gentlemen are going to talk about wicked problems in the world, specifically focusing on political polarization. I am one of your 5 hosts, Brendan Barry, and I'm going to have my co-hosts introduce themselves.
I'm Jack.
I'm Liam.
I'm Jackson.
My name's Lysander.
Well, I think we should go through, and seeing that we're talking about politics here, go through and talk about where we stand politically and kind of how our beliefs are. And I want to start. I want to start in reverse, and I want Lysander to lead us off because I know he's very passionate about some things, and I want to get a taste of how to really say what I want to say from him. So I'm going to hand it over to him.
All right. I am a Christian conservative, and that's my political leaning. You'll learn more about why I don't have any other tags attached to it later, but that's kind of my general stance on politics.
I'm also Christian conservative. I'm pretty Republican.
I would say I'm libertarian. I think the government should have a lot less control over things.
I'm also Christian conservative, but I honestly haven't really given much thought to it.
I like to call myself a centrist, but I'm definitely more Democratic leaning. But there's a lot of Republican values or conservative values that I also stand behind. So I'm always willing to listen to other people on both sides and get a viewpoint from here and there. So that is your 5 Bears leading the podcast this afternoon. I am now going to hand it back to our discussion leader, Lysander Plant, and we're going to start talking and get cooking for everybody out there listening. So, Lysander, where do you want to start off on this fine night for us?
You know, I kind of think that, we can just discuss general politics, stuff that's going on in the world, and specifically American politics, since, we all live here. But I want to start it off on a very nice and positive note. What do you all find amazing about living here, what do you all love about the United States, what do you all like about it? Because even though, negativity is high, I don't like being a negative person. I'm an optimist through and through. I see that God wins in the end, so my enemies lose. That's how I see it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, so that's how I see it. And, I just really like living in the United States. I really like the freedoms that the U.S. gives to its people. I've traveled the world. I've been to Peru. I've been to Rome. I've been to Colombia. I've been internationally traveling for a lot of my life. And since most of my family lives in Colombia, I know a lot about the Colombian politics and stuff. And the fact that, semi-recently, about last time I was there, about a year ago, one of the political opponents to the government tried to get assassinated with a grenade. It's just kind of failed assassination twice. This happened, I think, once with a grenade and some other things down in Colombia. I don't know, just makes me feel like we have a lot of things we take for granted here, like the fact that political oppositions aren't getting attempted assassinated by the government. So I just really like the freedoms that we've got here. And I also really enjoy, once you get a group of really tight friends, they're your friends for life, dude. I've met some really good people here and stuff, and I also like the opportunities that this country gives you. Because in Colombia, right, there's not, it's growing, sure, it's a developing nation, and that there just isn't as much opportunities for people if they are, looking for work and stuff. It's kind of very odd. So yeah, that's kind of what I like about living here. I'm going to pass it over to, who do I want to pass it over to? I guess you, Jack. What do you like about being here in the States?
It's such a great question that you've asked. I love America. It's where I've always grown up, Like you said, I've also been out of the country and realized how sick this place is, compared to everywhere else. And
mind if I ask where you've been?
Godspeed. Oh, Switzerland and Paris and Canada.
All right, I've been to Canada too.
You said you spent a lot of time in Colombia. What, you speak their native language,
Yeah,
which is?
Spanish.
Can we hear an example of that?
Nah, I'm good.
Oh, okay.
But I don't want to confuse the viewers too much because this isn't Spanish class.
That's very
I
respectable
appreciate
of
it.
you.
Thank you.
Well,
What do we love about America?
what do I love about America?
Yeah, we're all
Eagles,
answering.
burgers, and guns.
Well, I don't know. I'm very grateful to have been born here. I was born in the great state of Texas, Houston, big H town, and that was a concrete jungle down there. I lived in suburbia, but I moved up to New Hampshire when I was younger, and I am the only word I can really say is grateful to have grown up where I am. I am thankful that in our country we have the freedoms to be able to speak up for what we want to speak up about, and free speech, and there's a lot of rights that we have here that a lot of other countries in the world may not have. And I think what people don't understand is I dislike the quote, if you don't like it here, then leave, because I think that's contradictory to like what the scenario should be. I think that the people who don't like it here don't like it, and they have what makes this country great is that they have the freedom to go and make it change. They have the freedom to be able to try and create a country that they feel comfortable living in, and I don't know. That's why that's why I think this country is great, because if you don't like it, you have the ability to say that you don't like it.
And you have the power to change things. I totally agree with what you said about that quote that people love to say, if you don't like it, then leave. And as someone who's a little left-leaning too, I think
it's a very contradictory statement.
Yeah, 'cause like we might be complaining about the way things are here. That doesn't mean we're not grateful to live in this country, but throughout history, people have to complain so that things can change and the laws can basically evolve. That doesn't mean that it's not a great country, because when you look at it compared to other places, there's still vastly more freedom here in the U.S., but it's important to maintain that freedom, that we need to keep asking like what the problems are and how can we make it better here.
That's very insightful of you. Jackson, did you talk about what you love about this country?
Yeah, I mean, I love America. I think it's the greatest country in the world. I love the freedoms. I love the pride people take in living here. I love all the opportunities that people here are gifted with. I think it's pretty awesome that we... Oh, okay. I think it's pretty awesome that we all live here. That's pretty much it.
It is a nice community. I have, as we were talking about, traveling and stuff. I like you, Jack. I've been to Paris and northern France. I was in London for a short time. I've been to many places across America. I've been to, Florida and California and New York and, Chicago and the Midwest and, Omaha, Nebraska. And it's so different. It's I mean, we live in such a huge country. There are millions of people out there. I had this moment in New York City where I was standing on top of the Empire State Building, and I looked out over, the 5 boroughs, and I was like, holy crap. Like, there are millions of people there, like me and different. And, it was this huge moment of realizing how diverse this place really is. And, it gave me this feeling of importance, of knowing that even though, everybody's different, and that, my voice matters here in some places. Even if it's just back home, my voice matters. Because the people, of New York City's voices matter to New York City and anywhere else in the world.
That's the beauty of America.
So I think that we should probably continue and move on to another topic. Lysander,
Yeah.
what
Now
is
that-
something? Bring us closer to
Yeah.
people together.
Now that we got that very nice, wholesome little discussion out of the way, I do have a question. What do you all think about the rising crime in America? Because since the 80s, from what I know, the 80s were apparently the most violent time, and I don't think crime has really lowered from then. I'd have to check my statistics on it, or someone here can do that for me. But crime has just been on the rise a lot lately, and I want to know what you guys feel about that. Like, why do you guys think the sudden explosion has just kind of started happening? And what do you think about how it's being dealt with? Do you think people are doing a good job with it, or do you think something needs to change?
So I'm looking at the statistics right now. You're right that this is from 1990 to 2023. So in the 90s, crime was at a serious high point there. And it looks like per 100K population, you had 9 crimes or criminals. So since then, it seems to have come down a lot in the 2000s, the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2010 and even to 2015. But in 2015, the crime rate started rising. And from 2023 to 2021 to 2023, it's risen back up to 6.8. So what you're saying is kind of, to some extent, correct, that lately the crime has been on the rise.
All right, good to know I'm not completely stupid. So, what do y'all think? Like, where do y'all think it's coming from? Like, what
Anger.
do y'all think about it? Anger?
I think it comes out of a place of anger. A lot of people feeling like they are misused, mistreated, taken advantage of, manipulated in this country. People who want laws to change, people who break the law because, laws that, they're criminal. There's a lot of different crimes. There's a lot of different type of people that can commit a crime. It could be a kid selling, weed on a street corner to a woman getting an illegal abortion and, a man who is a literal serial killer. And at the end of the day, if they're all three in jail, then they're all three criminals. And, I don't...
I mean, I see what you're saying there, I think that right now, with the amount of social media and the amount of overall media polarization, like in the news, a lot of people kind of listen to that stuff and get very worked up, or they believe that the country is in a much more dire state than it is, and this anger kind of rises up in them and moves them to maybe do more criminal things. I think we're just in that era of high polarization where people are more likely to become extreme and maybe commit criminal acts.
I honestly think it also comes from the fact that, like, divorces are going up and broken homes are becoming much more common than ever, and it breaks my heart to think that, like, some kid might grow up without his father or mother or something like that. And I think that has something to do with that, because as a person whose family did get a divorce, it wasn't really early enough to impact me, but I like to think it still did, because something like that just doesn't not have an effect on you. So I do think that there's something to do with, like, broken homes or parents not paying attention anymore. And with all of this conglomerate in the media and stuff, or like people glorifying it in music, it really just does depend. I think that can help increase the crime rate and stuff. I'm not blaming any one of these things, but I can't help but feel like with the rise of some things that there might be a connection. Again, it could be correlation without causation. I'm really not sure, but I just feel like something is going on there.
So
Jackson, please, no, go.
So are you saying it's kind of like a cultural thing, like it's becoming?
I think, yeah, it's becoming kind of a cultural thing, because, crime in areas like California has just been going up. I mean, San Francisco has basically turned into the car break-in of the world, capital of the world. And instead of laws being tightened, they're getting looser around that areas, enabling it. I don't think that's helping the situation either. But I really think that like outside things are influencing the crime spike that we're seeing, and I don't think it's just that it comes from anger. I just think that it might be like, oh, the music I listen to tells me that this is gang shit, quote, and I want to look cool and I'm going to do it. Again, I'm not too sure about it, but there could be multiple factors going into this other than anger.
I think that going back to what you said about San Francisco has like a massive drug problem right now. Like there's people in the streets, it looks like a zombie apocalypse. And I think with this sort of new age that we're in, obviously the drug epidemic is a huge thing and definitely impacts crime a lot. People are way more likely to commit crimes if they're addicted to drugs or if they're on drugs. So I think what you have to also ask is, why are so many people on drugs now? Why is this such an epidemic? Obviously, this was also a thing in the 80s and 90s. But like we said, crime is coming up more now. And also, the opioid epidemic has become really huge. And you have to kind of ask, like, why are people driven to go towards drugs instead of trying to basically build a real life for themselves?
I just honestly, your answer to that, people might go to drugs because it's honestly just a thing, a party thing, sort of. It's a mix between a party thing and like actual help services being hard to find. Like when I basically got quit from one of my old jobs, basically, I had to find a therapist to get a note to go back into my job. And it was a pain to find a therapist. It took 6 months.
Yeah,
Like, that's insane.
Yeah, no, I totally know what you're talking about because one of my friends who's was looking for a therapist actually had a difficult time finding a therapist also, and it's crazy to think that there might be some people who are genuinely on the edge of maybe snapping mentally, and they actually take that step and say, I'm going to sign up for therapy and get help, and the therapist is like booked up. Like, that's kind of insane.
I don't think it's just booked up. I literally think it's it's a manpower issue because there's just not enough people in that job.
There are too many people who need therapists, and there's not enough therapists.
Yeah,
exactly.
In this day and age.
Yeah, this is a wicked problem.
Keep in mind, this is coming from a guy that doesn't think therapy helps at all. Like, I don't believe in therapy. I never have. But I could see how some people might find it helpful. And if there's a demand, there should be a service. I really think that. But with the demand so high, there's no one there to fill those shoes. And I don't know if that has been leading to self-medication increases and the sense of needing to belong to. Because, you know, you do drugs, you got all your drug buddies, you know? I don't know if that helps, if that is contributing to it. But I do know that, like, this isn't, like, something that can just fix overnight. Because it really isn't. Because some people do it for the fun of it. Some people do it because they want to fit in. Some people do it because they're depressed. It really is up to the individual. And I don't know if that has any other links going on with something I'll get back to, a topic that I'll get back to later. But I don't know if that has anything to do with the increase in crime. It probably is related, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm not going to pretend like I know everything. You want to add anything, Brendan? Because you've been holding your tongue for a while.
I wouldn't say I've been holding my tongue. I think that we had a conversation out in the lobby about drug crime and before coming into the studio, and you know, I think we could probably vamp. I think we could probably vamp off of that a little, and you know, at the moment, Liam, if you could, so kindly look up the percentage of drug-related crimes and the drug-related of incarcerate. Don't look it up with Siri. Type it in. I don't want to hear your Siri over the podcast. But
Make sure
I do know before researching it that there are thousands of incarcerated people and thousands of people who have criminal records related to drug crimes, whether that be getting caught smoking a joint to selling hundreds of pounds and kilos of cocaine from Colombia. And
Lysander has been to Colombia.
I know. I think that is very...
Yeah, no. They talk about like the drug problem all the time down in Colombia because a terrorist organization known as the FRC, the basically communists that have been fighting the Colombian government for years, and it got put to a stop in 2012. So thank God the fighting stopped, and it's now just a normal political party. To fund their guerrilla warfare operations, they would kidnap kids and sell drugs and stuff. Like, I'm not even joking. They would like steal people's property and sell it to fund their operations, which is not cool. That's why I call them terrorists. So, like, from experience, I know that Colombia has its own problems, and I don't know if that factors in. I mainly think the big drug problem is coming through the southern border through Mexico, because I say no, but I talked to a guy that is from Mexico, and he claims that his uncle's in the cartel. So I really don't know how valid these claims are, but that's what he claims.
So, as for the drug statistics, so recently...
Before you go on, is this from, like, the FBI or Department of Justice?
Drugabusestatistics.org.
I just want to know where it's from.
I mean, it is an organization.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. So...
Pretty legit.
Lately,
trust me, bro.
In the last few years, marijuana statistics as for, people arrested for possession have gone down. That's no doubt because it's become decriminalized in a lot of places.
And there are also many police that instead of arresting people for possession many states and police personally will just write tickets. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, marijuana I don't think impacts it that much, but when you look at the alcohol related crime statistics, 48% of homicide convicts were drinking before they committed murder, which is pretty crazy. So that's 7,334 homicides annually.
And yet we don't ban booze.
Exactly. And then we're talking about heroin, cocaine, and other products, which are much more extreme. Almost 50,000 Americans are arrested annually for the sale and manufacture of heroin, cocaine, and other derivatives like opioids and Percocets. 227,000 Americans are arrested annually for the possession of these products, and arrests made for the sale and manufacture of heroin and cocaine have actually dropped over the last decade by 53%.
That's interesting that they dropped, though. I'd honestly think it'd be higher, but it could be the news blowing it out of proportion. I don't watch the news. My dad does, so he tells me about this stuff.
I think to some extent also when you look at like places like San Francisco or places that just have drug addicts on the street, they're not getting arrested because they would have no place to put all of those people if they arrested them. So they just kind of let them sit there and use drugs, and I guess they target the people who are actually selling it.
Yeah, I guess it also makes sense. I also think it does have to do with the fact that, like, a lot of places don't feel like a well-knit community anymore. I feel like people don't trust each other enough nowadays.
I mean, gone are the days of, like, Levitt towns and,
It's true.
true suburbia community.
Yeah,
people
like,
live in these suburbias, but they hide in their homes all day.
No one knows each other.
You'd think no one else lives on my street half the day.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I do believe that religion is kind of important to the United States. Like, I feel like the decrease in Catholicism and the rise of atheism has played a part in the general degrade of the community and why,
But do you
these
believe the
things.
Government is responsible for
I
introducing that back into the communities?
I don't think the government is responsible for it because I think that's people's individual choices coming back.
I think
and the
it's
consequences of those choices.
I think what you're saying is right. Like personally, I'm very spiritual, and I think definitely the rise of atheism. Atheism in this case, I'm referring to literally not believing in anything. Like you don't think anything happens, you think you just die. And that's honestly, in my opinion, a pretty nihilistic point of view. And when you look at whether you believe in Christianity or whatever, if you believe in something, that will give you a lot more hope and sort of an outlet that isn't doing drugs. When you have such a nihilistic point of view, then you think nothing matters morally and you can kind of do whatever you want, which might also explain some of the crime statistics.
This is another thing that you're forgetting is that like religion also implies discipline and punishment. Like for example, in Christianity, if you sin and don't repent, this is the big thing, don't repent for it all your life, you either A, get stuck in purgatory for a while, which is basically you sit there for God knows how long.
Well, you have to do challenges, right? In Christian mythology.
That's the Divine Comedy of Dante's Inferno.
Okay, you just made that up?
Yeah, that's basically Christian
That's
fan
fiction.
It'd be cool, though.
It's cool.
American Ninja
I
Warrior.
agree. That's why a lot of people
Purgatory.
keep around with it, because it's cool. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Climbing the mountain of purgatory, that shit sounds cool. But I think purgatory is literally a white void that you just sit in and you get all
Like in
that time
SpongeBob.
to just mull and reflect on everything you've done. So some people believe in purgatory. Other people believe you go straight to hell. And the idea of going straight to hell for a lot of people is kind of terrifying because, you know, imagine burning in a lake of fire for the rest of your life. Like that kind of puts that morality perspective in your head of what's good and what's evil, and that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, if I do this, then I will get punished, right? But if I repent and seek forgiveness, then it's fine, you know? It's basically the cycle of like, oh shit, I did something bad, I'm gonna go make up for it, you know? Because sorry just sometimes isn't enough.
It requires you to basically have a moral compass that you're always thinking about. Even if you do bad things, someone who does bad things and just doesn't care versus someone who does bad things and regrets it, a lot of times if someone has that moral value, they might commit a crime, but when they regret it, they'll probably spend time trying to better themselves and be a better person and therefore be a more functioning member of society, versus the vast number of people who don't believe in anything is definitely responsible for an overall moral decline. And just some people are just kind of bad people these days.
The thing is, I'm not surprised that some people are kind of bad people, because I believe that we're all evil in our hearts. Like, that's kind of how I believe. Like, I'm not surprised when people do bad things, because that's just kind of how we are. Because in the Bible, we did rebel against God. So it's kind of in our nature, but through religion, you know, you take those steps to correct yourself and you become a stronger and better person because of it.
Yeah, I mean,
In fact,
see.
That's why I got fired from my work. Well, not fired, but that's why I kind of got put on leave because, you know.
I see what you're saying. So, but, you know, and my version of that would be that when you look at psychology, I think everyone has a bad part of their psyche and a good part of their psyche. I think everyone is capable of doing good. And I think that now that survival is not our main objective as humans, we don't have to worry about getting eaten by lions anymore, and we're in this era of luxury. I think the main objective is to master your own mind and basically be a good person and sort of fight off those bad tendencies that sort of dwell down in everyone's psyche somewhere.
I mean, the thing is, right, that also requires you to have a strong sense of will, you know? If your will is being degraded by, let's say, pornography or drugs or something, you're not going to be strong enough to stand against those impulses to do evil because your brain is inhibited. That's why I really don't like the drugs at all. I'm a very
So you
big
believe that
anti-drug.
drugs induce evilness within people.
I don't believe
it brings out the evil.
I don't believe that they bring out the evil. I believe they just weaken you and make it easier for that evil to come out.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So like weakens a barrier.
Yes. Like you have a mental barrier that tells you what is good because God in Christian mythos inscribed morality on your heart, but if you believe something else, that's fine. And basically that morality, how good, how true you are to that is basically you're a test of will every day. It's a test of will to not do bad things. And when you take drugs, they alter your mind and inhibit it. And I think that weakens the barrier to that stuff, makes it easier. Like, again, you said a high number of statistics. What was it? 53% of all homicides were done with alcohol. So I think that's the sign of the barrier being weakened, because it's like, okay, if he wasn't on alcohol, before he did it, would he have done it?
And not just on alcohol. I think a lot of those statistics are people who progress pretty deeply into that addiction of alcohol to the point where they really they're in a dark place, basically. They're alcoholics and their life probably sucks and they lose a sense of meaning. You know, because if you don't drink excessively, sure, you can drink and just have a great time. But definitely when you progress too far into that, it'll just make you a much more negative and potentially evil person.
And you want to know what's the kicker about all this? These people vote. Yeah, these people do vote. And they might have some stuff. And honestly, I do believe that like a large part of politics is faith. And coming back to politics, I really believe that your faith is really deep in your politics. And
I
that's
agree
how
completely.
I believe that's how that works.
Well, I mean, the right in American politics, usually the conservatives or, the Republicans, it's not a hidden fact or a hidden truth that the majority of them seem to be, more religious, more faithful than Democrats and liberals, and that kind of creates a big divide, actually.
Yeah.
Because then you have Democrats. I've had Democratic friends. I've been in debate circles in high school and during my gap year and just living and chatting with people, and I've met Democrats and who believe that Republicans are trying to take over America and create a theocratic regime.
And there's Republicans that believe the same thing about Democrats.
Republicans believe that Democrats are atheistic, anarchists who want to watch this country burn, or
they want to take the guns so they can have a dictatorship. But point is that the religion ties into polarization a lot, because it's not just like how are we running this country.
It's that like separation of state and church.
Right. It's like, what do you believe in?
How far it goes all the way into schools as well. I mean, where do we lie on having religion being taught in schools, and which religions? And if you talk about it, how do you do it so that it's equal and fair to all religions, or do you not talk about it at all and leave it up to individual and family learnings?
All right, I'm going to drop a pretty spicy take for me. This thing about the separation from church and state, right, is I'm pretty sure how I interpret it is that the government is not allowed to set up their own religion. And what I think happened is that they effectively did, which is modern day liberalism, because I personally do believe this. If I look at a modern day liberal, right, and I look closely to the Church of Satan, right, the tenets kind of line up very closely, and people do agree with them. That could be me. I could be.
What tenets are you talking about, though? Be specific.
Let me look up the Church of Satan tenets. There are 9 of them, and I think that like if you ask a generally leftist and liberal leaning person, like if they agree with these tenets.
All right, so I'm a generally liberal leaning I'm very liberal. Like, I think that like mushrooms should be legal. So let's go.
I'm talking like leftist, If you're libertarian, that's a bit different.
Well, Liam, there is a difference between liberal and libertarian.
No, I know that. I know I said I'm a libertarian, but I feel like in this
'Cause you
room
like
I'm
that
also
money.
very liberal.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Like my stance on abortion, for example, is very liberal.
Oh yeah,
So
you know my stance on abortion.
yeah, but
You
let's
call
not get
me
into
insane.
that.
You call me insane for
We cannot
believing
have
it.
5 white guys talking about abortion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We'll get canceled for that.
Those aren't the 9 sins. Okay. The 9 statements. Found it. Found the 9 statements of
Enlighten us.
the Church of Satan. So number 1 is Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence.
Well,
So-
that's a fact, right?
So what that means is you're giving into temptation, no matter what that temptation is. So like if you want to do drugs, hard drugs, and you're tempted by that, and you giving into that, that's one of the 9 statements for it. Number 2, Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams. What this means is that this is basically living in the moment. This is basically like, oh, don't worry, there is not really anything ahead. You should just do whatever you want right now, basically. That's what that means. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit. Basically, what this means is that, basically, it means that it's like we represent science, like hardcore science, like to a T, that your brain is just chemicals. You don't really feel anything. So just go out there and have some fun, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from,
And
where
then-
I think that ties into atheism, basically, is what
Yeah.
you're saying, where you don't believe in anything, so why not do whatever you want? There's no consequences.
Yes. I could be reading 3 wrong. It's been a while. I should have come prepared. I'm sorry. But number 4, Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of loving it, instead of love on wasted ingrates. What basically this means is that if you show kindness to someone that's like that you don't like an enemy, like how I do, because I forgive all my enemies.
Sure.
That's wasted love, basically. That is a bad thing to do.
Well, I don't think that liberals believe that, though. I think liberals believe in, I don't know, forgiveness, and I wouldn't say that, like you're saying, that they line up so closely. I think that some
I'm
of
not
this...
saying they line up closely. I'm saying they'll generally agree with it.
Well, I don't agree with that. You know, I think that people should be forgiven for things and whatever.
And props to you, but that basically that ties into the 5th one. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek. Like if someone wrongs you, don't forgive them and basically take your vengeance again. And then Satan represents the responsibility to the responsible instead of concerned for psychic vampires.
So let's go into abortion real quick and not
Okay.
derail into like
You
Satanism.
don't.
Okay, so
Not yet,
Lysander, let's talk about your stance on abortion that I said was insane. Do you remember exactly
Yes,
specifically what
do.
it was?
I do remember what it was, that it should be banned in all cases except in rape or incest or if the fetus's life is threatened.
And what I said was insane was that you said that if the mother's life is in danger, she should still have to be forced to have that baby, even if she might die from it. You said that she should... Correct? That's your
Yeah.
stance? Okay, do you want to elaborate on that a little? That's what I said was insane,
I mean,
in my opinion.
I mean, to be fair, it's just what I believe in, right? Because I hold more value to the unborn child than the mother giving it. And it's not out of a place of malice because I don't think anybody should die because they chose to have a kid. I think it's terrible that happens, but it does happen. And I think that, like, if a mother really loves her child, she should be allowed to sacrifice herself for that.
Allowed
think-
to, not forced to, though. Do you
I-
think she should be forced to by the government to
No.
die?
No.
So that is not your stance. Your stance is that if the woman's life is in danger, she can have an abortion.
That's the law I would pass if I was a lawmaker and trying to please the people.
But
that's not my
morally
stance on it.
is different than, your stance on.
I can separate my morality from practicality, from practical laws
Sure.
that I'd make.
So if you believe, here's what I was saying, right, is that if you believe that morally it would be a virtuous thing, of course, for a mom to like die for her baby to be born, sure, you can believe that. But I think it's insane to say that she should be forced to have that kid
I get where you're coming from, and that's why I say
by
that,
the government.
that's why I say that that's not the law I would pass as a lawmaker, because that really isn't practical.
Well,
to
let's
pass,
suppose
people
it's
are inherently
let's
selfish,
remove
in my
it
opinion.
from like you're the lawmaker and the people are going to hate
Okay.
you if you pass this. If this is just you could like snap your fingers and have this law become a thing. Just because it's your moral stance that a mother should die for her baby, would you, if you had the choice, make it so that every mother has to die for her baby even if, her life is in danger?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's insane in my opinion. But,
That's perfectly all right. I'm fine with it. Again, I am a polarizing person. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and because we're in America, we can say all these insane things that some people think are insane and get away with it. And that's kind of the beauty of this country.
yeah, I know. Yeah, the ironic thing
But that
is,
leads
right?
to polarization. Not that that's a bad thing. I think freedom of speech is the
Sure.
best thing. But specifically with the abortion topic, you can. I mean, anybody listening, and especially for the rest of us in the studio, it's blatantly clear to tell that Liam and Lysander here are very far apart on this abortion issue, and that, I mean, when it comes to something that really is boiled down to the fact that, in my opinion, abortion is a moral issue. There is no right way to go about it.
I agree.
Made out of complete morality.
To be fair, again, and my view on abortion does tie back to my faith, and I generally go by the
I
youngest
understand that,
and
and that's
oldest
all right.
rule, basically, where the youngest takes priority.
And
over
I
the
would
oldest.
say when you look at it from a strictly Christian point of view, that we all have separate souls, then you're saying this baby maybe has a whole life to live. The mom only has half a life to live, depending how old she is. So from that perspective, morally, you think it would be better for the baby to be born. But that's why it all comes down to faith. Because if you, for example, believe in reincarnation, then it doesn't really matter if the baby is never born. It doesn't matter. Because everything is going to reincarnate eventually, and it doesn't matter. And if the mother's choice is that she wants to live her life, then that's okay.
I also think that goes for the other way as well. If you do believe in reincarnation, then that means that the mother will also get another shot at life and a full life too.
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, no. Anyone else have any thoughts about it before I change subjects about this?
I mean, I'm ready to move on from abortion. I don't really want to lead off with what I'm about to say, but like what I do have to say is going on the fact that I know this isn't the point you were trying to bring up, that like the baby is more important than the mother, but I would also feel like it would be ridiculous to let the mother die when the mother is already a person, presumably, who has a position and a role in this world and in this life already. And the fact that, there are doctors out there who would just let this woman die just so that they don't kill this unborn child, to me is a little confusing. As I already stated, I do believe it is a complete moral issue.
Right, because when you look at it from a Christian point of view, I guess what I'm saying is, when you abort a baby, that's a whole separate soul from the mother that is, poof, it's gone. It's never going to be lived. But if you look at it from a reincarnation perspective, where the mother and the baby are one and the same, then it makes sense to abort the baby. And if the mother feels comfortable having a baby later, then that's great. Then you have two lives. But when it's from that perspective, they're not necessarily separate souls. It's all kind of one thing, is the belief of reincarnation.
I mean, I do agree with Brennan that I do think like the doctors should still try and save the mother no matter what. Like,
I would hope so.
yeah, I would hope so too. They took an oath to do
I
no harm.
I mean in the case that like they. Oh no, you're right. I misunderstood what you were getting at, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that like this is obviously a big issue, but I think the bigger issue obviously about abortion is when does the fetus have life, and when does it become okay to abort it and not? And I think that's where far left and far right really come into play.
Well, that's where the far right and far left try to find a middle ground of like
and they can't.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, it's they
That's the wicked problem.
They understand the right understands that they can't completely ban abortion because that would cause outrage, and the left know that they can't get it completely legalized because there are always going to be specific states, especially with the I don't know what word you would use, the abolishment of Roe v. Wade. The repeal of Roe v. Wade. Thank you. You can have individual states making the decisions now, and so when it's left up to states' rights, I think it's all right to have it be left up to states' rights. But I also still believe that it shouldn't be really left up to anybody's rights, and that I think that even though it's not written and codified, it doesn't have to be for it to be a basic fact that women should be allowed to, in my opinion, get an abortion. I don't really know like how late would be too late. I don't understand the terms of pregnancy. I haven't really done my research, but
I not to cut you off or anything. I didn't know if you were done or anything. I do
Continue,
want to.
please.
I do want to go
done.
back to the. I do want to go back to the topic that we were talking about at the beginning with crime, because you guys didn't answer my question of how would you deal with it, because I think the right and the left have very different approaches to how you deal with crime.
I think you're right. I think this is a very good topic to go back to.
Like, we have very different approaches to how we deal with crime. Like, for example, I think that if someone is on, like, their 5th felony or more, the police should just be legally allowed to execute them on the spot. That's just my point of view.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I genuinely didn't catch that all. Could you repeat that?
If a criminal is on their 5th felony charge, 5th one, 5, 6, or something greater than that, I don't know what the hard number will be, because I'm not an expert in anything, but a high number of felonies, they just get killed on the spot.
This is what I would strongly disagree with, because if that felony is rape, let's say a person has raped their 5th 5-year-old, then please, by all means, kill him. But in my opinion, a felony charge could be selling drugs. If a person sells a large amount of marijuana and happens to get caught 5 times, does that person deserve death, in your opinion, Lysander?
Well, yes, because that's what he just said.
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
I mean, to be fair, I do think there's an issue of what is defined as a felony in this country.
Exactly,
and it goes back
that's
to those laws.
That's the problem.
Because the thing is, right, the laws aren't well defined on what the hell a felony is, because if I take my AR-15 and drill a 3rd hole in it, that counts as a felony.
Exactly. So
and I don't think people should die on that. I think the fundamental issue is down to the restructuring of what a felony is defined as, but say that the laws were restructured in a way that makes sense of what a felony is, then I think that if someone commits a certain amount larger than a certain amount of those types of crimes, that they should just get killed.
Here's the problem with that, right, is when you put such insane governmental power as like just being able to kill someone for a felony, like you said, you don't believe that drilling a hole in a gun should be punishable by death. I don't believe that selling weed should be punishable by death, even if it is clearly against the law. And I don't care how many times you do it. I don't think a person's life should be snuffed out because of that. So, when you put that power in the government while society is constantly changing what we define as acceptable, constantly changing our moral values. So I don't think it's right to just have the power to execute someone over a felony.
I get where you're coming from, right? And I do understand what you're saying about the current legal system of felony, but this is why objective morality is so important, and just like what we can tell them what's right and what's wrong. Because if someone is, say, like on their 5th felony, but that felony is like non-violent felony, like drug selling or drug overdose, should they die? Probably not. But I will like be like, okay, why are you on your 5th felony at this point? Like, what's going on?
Sure, you can like maybe moderate the punishment, but I just think dying is killing someone, executing someone is kind of insane. And that goes into, this is why half the population has guns. This is why the Second Amendment is important, so that the government doesn't start executing people for committing a felony, because otherwise they could basically do what they want.
I mean, yeah, I completely get where you're coming from. And the ironic thing about me is that, like, I really don't like the government having any sort of power at all. I know. It's weird. My political beliefs are very
neither
strange.
do I, but yet you just said someone should be executed by the police.
The thing is, right, I don't know how exactly it should work, but I do think there should be some tougher punishments for crime. And I bring up execution because that's one that like people look at and go, God damn, and then they start to engage with me about topics like this.
But
right?
Here's the problem is, like, even with crimes that we do have the death penalty for, there's like a substantial amount of people who get falsely executed. It's happened many times. So when you start pushing that into other crimes like drug crimes or whatever, that a lot of innocent people would die, in my opinion. And that's the problem with the death penalty, is not that if I thought I was going to die, get executed for selling drugs, would that deter me from selling drugs? Absolutely. But if we actually practically implicated that into our society, it would not work, because you'd have a ton of people. It would be so easy. I mean, you could plant drugs in someone's garage and then call the cops on them and they'd fucking kill them.
Not only that, but like, I mean, this might be totally off topic, but I did hear somewhere that it's like crazy expensive to execute somebody. So
it is.
So I mean, think of all the new people that would be getting killed, for all these smaller crimes and stuff. All these, if they're adding up, you would
absolutely
everybody's tax. I mean, it would be crazy how much money they'd be spending
and
instead of just letting them. Yeah, obviously you don't want drug dealers out on the streets and stuff, but I don't know.
If you're saying the police should execute them on the spot without a trial, that's just, that goes against every principle of our nation.
It violates our Constitution.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, I'm all for the death penalty, but I don't think you can just be handing it out that easily.
Yeah.
Without
it is
a trial.
really expensive.
Like, he sold
there's a lot that goes into it. Also, a funny fact about it's actually a morbid fact, but a morbid fact about the death penalty is I believe the majority of times that there have been like hundreds of botched executions.
Yeah.
Like in every single method, there is not a sound method of execution, and the lethal injection actually is very painful.
The electric chair.
It may paralyze. It may paralyze the person on the outside, but it does not paralyze the juice that they give them. Does not paralyze the nervous system. So for anywhere from 5 minutes to half an hour, you're just like lethal. You're painfully sitting there, excruciatingly in your last moments as you slowly find yourself finding it harder and harder to breathe. It's pretty bad.
That could be an innocent person.
But also, I say all this, but I'm also for the death penalty.
Yeah, I think that there should be some cases, but
yeah,
I think there's a reason why it doesn't happen.
I think
often.
I think the death penalty should be completely like a complete crime-to-crime basis.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I absolutely think if you're a rapist or a murderer, or if you do something on that level, you absolutely deserve
eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You take a life, we take.
That is how the Bible structures crime and punishment, though. Eye for an eye, hand for a hand.
That
stuff like
I do know that.
So,
yeah.
it's not completely out of line, but again, I just think
Doesn't
a
the
lot of
Bible also
symptoms-
teach forgiveness, though? You were talking about that
it
earlier.
does teach about forgiveness
Love
too.
for your enemies.
It does. But the thing is, right, it doesn't teach you to let your enemies just walk all over you.
That's why we have jail, you know?
I mean, yeah, but like also it's just like, you know, the Bible does have death for some of the crimes in there, and not like a humane death either, like stoning. It's very
Well, where in
primitive.
the Bible? I'm not a Bible expert.
It's in the book of Genesis. It's been past some of the parts that I
Old
read.
Testament?
Yeah, like
Old Testament.
Old Testament.
So
yes.
if you are a Christian, you believe that Jesus came after the Old Testament to basically set shit straight and say, you guys are interpreting this wrong. So in my opinion, stuff in the Old Testament is very shaky and should not always be listened to.
The thing is, right, that's the beauty of it. It's up to interpretation, right? Like, I'm not saying that the thing is, I'm not really sure. I'm not exactly a lawyer. I don't know a lot about crime and punishment. The one thing I do know for certain is that I believe we do need to be tougher on crime, because there needs to be actual deterrent for people to not commit crimes.
Sure.
And something as drastic as death, ironically, is a really good deterrent to help keep crime rates low.
I see what you're like. Obviously, like
I
it's
don't
gonna keep
believe in
people
scare
away.
tactics.
I think it would work kind of, but also like you're still gonna like you already know that there's a lot of people that are gonna be like, yeah, whatever, and they're still gonna do everything, and then you're gonna end up killing a lot of
I
people.
see
and that's
where
gonna
you're
make a lot of
coming
people
from,
mad.
though.
Yeah,
We
it makes
see your
sense,
point.
kind of.
Yeah, the thing is, right, when I get to explain things, it really just does become clear where I come from, basically, like where I'm coming
Like the
from.
things you say, I'm like, that's crazy, but I see where you are coming from, if that
course.
makes sense.
Oh yeah, no.
We do have to wrap this up, but basically,
We have run out of studio time.
yeah.
Actually.
Okay, we gotta get out of here. But
I want everyone to give their closing thoughts.
my closing thought is that basically this whole podcast and the whole dynamic here, if anything, it shows just the polarization that can exist in one small room. So when you're applying this vast array of ideas and disagreements across a whole nation, that's a prime example of why politics are so polarized right now.
I think this also shows why it's a good idea to discuss politics, because if someone has an idea that you don't agree with, you can tell them and attempt to change their mind about that stuff, and it gives you a chance to work things out peacefully. And if it's someone that you don't know, you might become better friends with them in the end, because disagreement is par for the course in human nature, and it's just par for the course about living on this crazy globe that we live on. And I really think that polarization does have its drawbacks, but it also has its pros too, and we shouldn't forget about that every edge has its mirror, that every action you do also has its consequence, whether that be good or bad, and that disagreements should allow us to become stronger, not just as a community, but as a nation too.
And not once here in this hour of debate and discussion did any of us raise our voices at each other. I think it is important that although polarization is high, us being in this room together, chatting like adults, like mature adults, and respecting each other's opinions is a prime example of how everyone out there, anybody listening to this, can minimize the political polarization and actually listen to each other and try and hear where each other are coming from, because every single person has a different life experience than you, growing up, childhood, teenagehood, young adulthood. Everyone went to a different college or went to a different trade school. I mean, and people don't do shit with their lives, but like it doesn't matter. If we can all communicate effectively, we can all try and come together again and be social as people were before the age of I guess fear. I guess we kind of live in a big age of fear. Those are my wrapping up statements. And if you care about the world you live in and you care about the well-being of others, then care about the well-being of everybody. And be vocal. Listen to others.
I guess another thing I should add on to it is that we should just all be more trusting of each other, no matter what our viewpoints are, and that's all I'd like to add to Brennan's statement.
I agree.
All right, let's dip.
Well, this has been an interesting podcast.
I think you'll
this
never
has
make
been
everybody
Lysander,
happy.
co-host
You can't ever make
Lysander,
everybody happy.
signing off.
Bye, Lysander.
Jackson, any last thoughts?
Yeah. I just think it's good that you can get a room full of people who don't necessarily agree on much politically, but they can all have a civil conversation about it and not
And
fight about it, and they all
the-
clearly care
Which is
for
quite rare,
Yeah.
I think.
the country.
And the best part, I mean, what also helped is the fact that we became a group before we even really knew each other's political stances. But either way, that it doesn't matter. You get to know people, and that's how it goes. But this has been the 5 Bears and 1 Wicked Problem podcast, and I hope to all you out there who listen to this fine podcast, you have a lovely day, and I hope that you learned something new. So take it easy and have a wonderful rest of your life.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Okay,
I enjoyed it.
Can we play some of that back so that we can...
Some people